Thank you, Jason, for taking time today for this interview. I'm really looking forward to learn some new things, some very poignant things and topics we're going to discuss today, specific to the pandemic and the economic crisis that it's creating, both at a global level and at an individual level. My guest today is Jason Turner of J. Turner Law Group. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Jason, and what you focus on, what your area of practice is.
Yeah, sure. Good to be with you here, Miguel. I've been in practice since 1992. My practice is primarily bankruptcy and real estate work. Often those overlap, working with individuals as well as small businesses in dealing with debt issues. Sometimes they do not. My real estate practice, I have many clients who don't have financial issues, but they've got some thorny legal issue with the real property that they're owning or buying or selling or managing.
Excellent. So real estate law, bankruptcy law, two really important topics and areas that have been extremely affected because of this pandemic.
Yes.
And the self-inflicted recession that we put ourselves into. Loss of jobs, loss of income, diminished income, inability to pay mortgage or rent, and then creating a death spiral, so to speak, of credit.
And businesses struggling with, they have to close, or maybe they reduce their business quite a bit, and they don't know how long that'll last, and then what will happen once all of the restrictions are lifted. Can they survive? Can they bounce back? And I have a lot of clients in that position right now.
Yeah, I can see tons of business just being shuttered and maybe not making a comeback after this is over, which is sad. So I wanted to talk to you firstly about rent. A lot of my investor clients have asked me, hey, what do I do if my tenants don't pay? And the inverse question to that is tenants asking, what do I do if I can't pay?
Yeah.
So let's start off there, Jason, if it's okay. What actions should tenants take right now if they have a negative impact on their income and their ability to pay their rent?
Yeah. Well, the statistics I read, New York Times or Bloomberg earlier this week, were that about a third of Americans who are renters haven't paid missed paying either in March or in April. So it's a colossal problem, and it's also here in Southern California and San Diego. If it's a tenant, first of all, we'll limit ourselves right now to residential tenancies. Commercial are also having difficulties, but just right now, talking about residential. Somebody's renting for their own home. If they cannot pay their rent, the first thing is to talk to their landlord or talk to their property manager and explain the situation. And if the landlord has any compassion as well as any good financial sense, then they're going to want to work with their tenants as much as they financially can. What happens next, or something like that. I'll say the tenants get some of the economic stimulus benefits that they can use to pay rent, or job bounces back. But for a tenant, good idea, first of all, is to reach out to the landlord or the property manager and explain, hey, I'm not going to be able to pay this month's rent because I don't have any money. We work something out.
Right. Now, one of the concerns that many a landlord has is, what if my tenants do have an ability to pay? They do have their, say they're still working, they're still generating income, and said tenant decides not to pay rent. What then?
Well, the landlord still has, with some caveats, the landlord still has their legal rights under landlord-tenant law in California. If a tenant doesn't pay, they first give them a 3-day notice, pay rent, or quit, or move out. And if the tenant does not pay within those 3 days, then the landlord has the right to start an unlawful detainer case to evict them. Caveat is that in California, in certain cities, it's not a statewide mandate yet, but in certain cities, including the city of San Diego, including the unincorporated areas of San Diego County, and a few other cities are also considering this, imposing at least a temporary moratorium on evictions that are based on non-payment. So landlord first needs to figure out, okay, is my property in one of those jurisdictions? City of San Diego, unincorporated area of the county. I think National City this week was, the city council was considering an eviction. Okay, so does a moratorium affect my property? But that doesn't mean that the landlord is out of luck or out of options. For instance, with the county of San Diego, the moratorium applies and it protects a tenant if the tenant first reaches out to the landlord and says, I've been economically impacted by COVID-19, I can't pay my rent. Then the tenant has to, within, I believe, 14 days, provide proof, verification to the landlord that, in fact, their income has gone down. You know, like a notice from their employer saying they've been laid off, or some other, or their business had to close. If the tenant does that, then this moratorium is in effect. The landlord cannot start an eviction at least through the end of May of this year. And so the landlord still has a lot of their legal options. And of course, the moratorium does not affect the landlord's right to evict somebody for an issue unrelated to payment. So let's say a tenant is, they're misusing the property. They're, they have their tires in the backyard that they're burning and causing a nuisance. Landlords can still evict for that per California law. The moratoriums just affect where it's the tenant is not paying the rent, and the landlord in certain cities, under certain circumstances, cannot evict the tenant, at least for the next 2 months.
So what's a good point of advice then to give landlords to protect themselves too, but also to kind of stay ahead of this, and for property management companies when it comes to dealing with tenants and potential for lack of payment?
Well, it's first really key to understand what the applicable law is where the property is located. And a landlord may live in Chula Vista, for instance, where there isn't a rent eviction moratorium, but if their property is in the city of San Diego, then they got to first check that law, either by themselves or working with a real estate attorney. Let me also give you a couple of other things to keep in mind regarding Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Because overarching, we've got landlord-tenant law, which is California law, right? It's unique to California. Each state has its own. But Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, right about the time of the big stimulus act 2 weeks ago, imposed their own moratorium on foreclosures. So anyone who has a Fannie or Freddie loan on their property and is falling behind, there's at least a temporary moratorium on foreclosures. But that also affects landlords, because the Fannie and Freddie said they're not going to suffer a foreclosure, they're not going to lose their property, but they also cannot evict the tenant for non-payment of rent, and that's nationwide. So that's a further layer that sort of overlaps with California landlord-tenant law. So the bottom line is, Miguel, for a landlord, the best thing is do the research, either on their own, do some really good research, or get some help from a good real estate attorney.
Yeah, and I would say probably that'd be a good point of advice for tenants as well. Get yourself connected to a real estate attorney that can assist you.
Yep.
Um,
Yep. Exactly.
so message sounds very clear. This is not a free for all for tenants. You can't just skip out on payment.
Right.
Make arrangements or start communicating
Right.
with your landlord if you have economic distress.
Right.
Um,
And let me add one other thing, Miguel.
yep,
Even if there's a moratorium and the landlord cannot evict, it doesn't erase the rent. In other words,
right,
let's say I'm a tenant and you're my landlord, and we're in an area where you cannot evict me. I've lost my job. I cannot pay the rent right now. So there's no eviction, say, at least through the end of May. Um, but in June, I still owe April and May's rent. And I
right,
got to work with you as my landlord to catch up, as well as start paying June, July, and August. So the rent does not go away. It's not forgiven or canceled
right.
by these moratoriums.
Right. So tenants still owe the rent. They're going to have to make arrangements, as you said, just to summarize, they're going to have to make arrangements with their landlord to catch up
Yeah,
on those 2 months. Those are still
yeah,
owed. Um, yeah. So I know that there's a lot of confusion. A lot of landlords are extremely nervous and anxious about the potential
yeah.
of what this could mean for them economically, but there are some tools in place for both tenant and for landlords. So sounds like communication is the key for both sides.
Hmm.
Communicate to put landlords at ease. You could still file the a notice to pay or quit, and you can still start the eviction process. It's just going to be delayed, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
If it's delayed by the moratorium, the courts are also here in San Diego and in many other counties. Courts are closed,
Closed.
so they're not even accepting filings and not holding trials and hearings. So that's another uh, delay issue
Wow.
over and above the moratorium.
Wow. But there's tools in place. So again, I'm just going to
Yeah.
reiterate both for landlords and for tenants, uh, partner up with a real estate attorney that can help you. Jason's a great resource. And before this interview's over, we'll have you give us your best contact information for a landlord or a tenant to reach out to you so that they can get some assistance.
Yeah, and
Now,
I work mostly with I work mostly with landlords.
yeah,
On the tenant side, commercial tenants, not so much on the residential tenants, but there are some really good resources.
good.
If somebody calls me as a tenant, I can refer them to some
Refer
really
them out.
good resources.
Excellent. And then touching on all this loss of income or income impacts, businesses going out of business. So both for business
Mhm.
owners and employees, I foresee there being a huge debt crisis here coming up
Yeah.
real soon. Um, let's talk a little bit about tools that individuals may have at their disposal to be able to address some of the either new debt or increased debt due to the pandemic crisis, and how individuals can start the process to recover from this.
Yeah.
What are some of your best recommendations for individuals?
So if someone has seen their income drop, they don't have any income right now, but they've got bills. We've talked about rent for a tenant. Reach out to the landlord and property manager. It's a good idea to reach out to credit cards and tell them, hey, I can't make this month's payment. Otherwise, the credit cards are going to call you. If you're late, they're going to start calling. But it's okay to tell them, I can't make this month's payment, not even the minimum payment, because I have no income. And a lot of credit card companies, as I understand, are at least during this time, they're being more lenient. There may be late fees. Interest will continue to accrue, but they're they're not putting those accounts into.
I'm assuming there's you just talked about Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and forbearances and moratoriums on foreclosures. is forbearance something that's well, what is it a good strategy to begin with your bank if you can't make your mortgage payment? And what are potential impacts of forbearance on credit and future financing opportunities?
Well, yeah, forbearance is a good way to save the property. Often we're in a crisis, financial crisis, and we have to sort of prioritize and sometimes triage financially.
Right.
So we all want to, of course, maintain. If we have a mortgage, we want to save our house, pay our bills, keep our credit in good shape. But it may not be possible to do all of those things right now. So you have to sort of triage and like, okay, what's the most important? Like I keep a roof over my head and my family. So it's a good idea to reach out to the lender, ask for a forbearance. It may, if you fall several months behind, a repayment plan or maybe even a loan modification. Those were very common 10 years ago during the last financial crisis. Those may become really important in the coming months.
And how does the forbearance and maybe even a loan modification impact someone's credit worthiness going forward?
Well, my experience from the last financial crisis, where we had a lot of loan modifications, is because they were so common, and this is true also for bankruptcy,
Right.
because they were so widespread, and because it was, in many cases, somebody needed a loan modification or they need a bankruptcy because of financial things really beyond their control, that it's not holding them back that much. Now, what's to the credit score, loan modification helps the credit in that you have it net modified, so say your loan is no longer delinquent. That helps you. But again, one of the things to keep in mind is credit score right now may not be the most important thing.
True.
Most consumers to be protected. Most important is make sure you've got a roof over your head, enough money to pay for food, for utilities. If somebody falls behind on utilities, gas, electricity, water, reaching out to the utility companies, because under the Stimulus Act, and I think also under California law now, the utilities around California have to work with consumers, so there's not a shutoff where if somebody falls behind. So that's another really important thing. Those are the top priorities for anyone. Is how do I make sure I've got my house, my home is safe, and then work on the other things as you can. But in answer to your question, loan modifications, forbearances, usually they're not hurting the credit because somebody's credit already, if they're falling behind, their credit's already hurt.
Yeah.
And they can help because they stop the bleeding, the hemorrhage.
Right. Well, we're in full on survival mode at the moment, right? So the priorities are shelter, food.
It's financial triage.
Yeah.
I do that as an attorney with my clients, and most people who are dealing with their own financial issues in their home, their household, or their business, they've got to do some financial triage.
Yeah. So perfect segue then to the next topic is who should be considering filing for bankruptcy, and is bankruptcy a good option for many?
It is, and probably will be for more people in the coming months, let's first talk about consumers, because I do a lot of work with consumers on consumer debt, and then also small businesses. So for consumers, if they already had financial issues even before the coronavirus, and large credit cards, maybe large medical bills. Maybe they didn't have health insurance and they had a hospitalization and now they've got a big bill. And there wasn't realistically a way to pay those off. Those are good candidates right now to do a bankruptcy, to save their assets they have, like maybe their house and their car, and to get some financial breathing space and some financial freedom.
Yeah.
If the financial economic crisis continues and somebody, let's say they didn't have big financial, they weren't behind on things before, but after 3 or 4 months, things are really beginning to build up in terms of debt, in terms of being, they're might at risk of their car being repossessed, foreclosure is starting or the lender is threatening it, then those are also good candidates. Okay. Bankruptcy, because we can wipe out a lot of credit card, medical debt, save the house, save the cars.
Wow. What about I'm thinking like small business owners specifically. I'm thinking about like restaurant owners, bar owners, your small mom and pop shops, like maybe a dry cleaners, a lot of these businesses who just really cannot operate at full anywhere near any type of capacity, and their margins are fairly small. What about those business owners? What ability do they have to utilize BK as a tool?
Bankruptcy can be a really good way to take care of old debt, and either if they need to just close down the business, it's a very good way to close down the business as clean as possible and get a fresh start. If they have a business where it was going along pretty well before this crisis, but now they've got debt is really piling up, or they've got vendors, they thought they would be able to pay them, but now they can't. Right. Bankruptcy can be also a really good option in terms of what Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is a type of bankruptcy, and the Stimulus Act actually makes it a little more flexible to do a Chapter 11 for business that can survive if it can restructure, reduce some of the debt, restructure, and negotiate with the creditors in order to survive and to move forward. And what I do is small businesses that are having financial issues, those are really good referrals for me. Sometimes we can find a solution outside of bankruptcy that doesn't involve bankruptcy. Maybe it's just 1 or 2 major creditors. We can negotiate those, and then my clients never even have to go into the bank court. Others, they've got multiple issues, maybe multiple properties where they're leasing and vendors and lines of credit, and a Chapter 11 makes sense as a way to save the business. So, but I do a lot of consultation with small businesses trying to figure out, okay, what are the best options? Something outside of bankruptcy or using the bankruptcy system really to level the playing field, because all these creditors, they don't want a small business to file for bankruptcy.
Right.
But you got to remember, all those banks, credit card companies, they are the first ones to go into bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court, to use it for their benefit.
Right.
If they need it.
Right.
And so what I try to do is help my clients level the playing field, because bankruptcy is a system that's available to all Americans, everybody here, small businesses and consumers, if they qualify.
Yeah. Now, bankruptcy court, is it operating at any capacity right now?
Yeah. The bankruptcy courts, federal courts are open.
Okay.
We file everything electronically. All the hearings now are being done by telephone or by Zoom meeting, like what we're doing here. And so we're still chugging forward. And one of the great things is, if somebody has debt and the creditor is on their doorstep saying, we're going to repossess business equipment or a car, or we're going to foreclose. The minute we file, those creditors must stop. And then it gives us breathing room to figure out better options to save valuable assets.
So if someone was considering or has begun to consider bankruptcy as an option for them to, hit the reset button, can they reach out to you now and start the process? Excellent.
Yes,
Excellent.
absolutely.
And Jason, what's your best contact information so you can share with our audience here so they can reach out to you?
My phone number here at J Turner Law Group is area code 619-684-4005. My email address, first of all, website is www.jturnerlawgroup.com. And best email to reach me is jturner@jturnerlawgroup.com.
Awesome. Jason, thank you. Thank you for giving us so much information, giving us a ray of light in the darkness, a ray of hope for tenants, landlords, business owners, individuals dealing with this anxiety and distress of so many negative economic impacts because of this pandemic. So thank you for being a resource, not only for your clients, but for everyone here seeing and listening to this interview today. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Yeah, there are solutions in many cases, but the key is to get, let's talk. Let's figure out what are the right solutions.
So if you're a landlord and you're having issues already with tenants and you need some help, some guidance with real estate law and what the eviction process will look like during this pandemic, Jason's a great resource. If you're a tenant, a residential tenant, Jason can guide you to the right direction. And if you're a commercial tenant, Jason can assist you. And obviously, if you're an individual or a business owner who needs to start the bankruptcy process, you need to restructure, reset. Jason can be a massive resource for you. So don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again, Jason, for your time today. I'm looking forward to having an interview with you post pandemic crisis right after
in person
we start, and then one maybe 3 to 6 months after the recovery, just to see how things have changed. I'm really excited to maybe create a series with you and see how things have evolved since this interview.
It's a super idea.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks again for your time, Jason. I appreciate it.
Okay. Yeah. You take care.